This is the Convo Lounge. Expression, exposure, experience.
We're on episode 8 of the season 2 of Convo Lounge, our podcast, and like we've been saying, we are talking any and everything around the creative industry, just to find out what insights are there, opportunities that are there in the creative space. And if we're going to talk about creativity and the creative space, it's also very important to touch on issues of intellectual property, because oftentimes it comes up that a lot of people get robbed of their millions of hard-earned cash or what they actually deserve. And we are privileged to have in studio I think you're the first person to set up an IP firm in the country, advocacy firm in the country.
I will preface that by saying I'm not the first person to practice intellectual property law in Botswana, but yes, I am the first person to set up an intellectual property consulting firm in Botswana.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So let's talk about that then. How did it get to go for you to actually get to set up such a firm?
It was the result of a very long process that I think began in my childhood.
Yeah.
Because I've always been, I've always been fascinated by creativity. I've always been fascinated by, the sciencey stuff. So creation of new things, innovation has always been something that has always been in my bloodstream.
Yeah.
And then I pursued a law degree, and I think the combination of my law degree and my passions over life kind of just directly led me to intellectual property as the one area that really resonated with me.
Yeah.
So then after I completed my undergrad, I was shopping around. I was looking for, to work for a law firm that could help me get on this intellectual property track. And I wasn't having a lot of luck.
Yeah.
I wasn't having a lot of, I wasn't finding the right fit. I wasn't finding the kind of place that would give me the work that I wanted to do. So essentially I decided, okay, I'll set up a consulting firm then.
Yeah. And you are no stranger to creativity, like you say. I understand you also had an agency, DM. Let's talk about that.
Yes. It was not my agency. It was started by a very good friend of mine, Thapelo Borokile, and I joined him very early on. It was called DM Creative Brands. I think it was one of the first few brand management firms in Botswana.
Yeah.
And, we were chartering uncharted territory. It was a good time.
Yeah. During that time, through your DM Creatives, what happened? Was there something that actually happened for you to also, see that there is an opportunity for you to be practicing IP law and actually provide IP law services, taking off from DM Creatives?
Absolutely. Because during my time at DM Creative Brands, I got to deal with a lot of public figures. I got to deal with a lot of creatives. I got to manage their business portfolios.
Yeah.
And being a law student at the time, of course, I took every opportunity to apply what I was learning in the classroom to the work that I was doing at DM Creative Brands. And upon my exit, it was very obvious that this is the field for me.
Yeah. And let's talk about the IP, the scene right now in Botswana, or just maybe when you started, the understanding of intellectual property, mostly amongst us creatives. What is the status quo?
Right. We're at a very exciting time. Firstly, when we started, one of the major challenges that we had to address was there is an absolute lack of knowledge around what intellectual property is and what it is capable of being. And I think the latter part is more important, because in as much as we've been building knowledge through hosting workshops over the past 3 years or so, we are still yet to get to a point where we feel that our constituents understand that intellectual property is an economic asset at the end of the day.
Yeah.
You can have copyright over your book. It doesn't mean much if you can't put it in the market and derive economic value from it.
Yeah.
So we're at a point where we need to transition from knowing that you can have copyright to knowing what you can do in an economic sense with copyright.
Yeah. So when you look at IP issues in the country, right now you find that there are a lot of creatives that are upcoming. and we really need to start instilling this understanding of intellectual property in them, right? What is intellectual property? If you could maybe explain it for, I don't know what sort of example would be easy for somebody to actually grasp what IP is. Somebody who's watching the podcast right now, listening to it, maybe what they are doing, it could, constitute at that IP and actually get to benefit from it.
Yes. So there's no easy way to explain what IP is.
Yeah.
But safe to say, IP, when we speak of intellectual property, we're speaking of creations of the mind. And when we're speaking of intellectual property rights, we're speaking of the legal protections that attach to the creations that are a result of the application of human intellectual labor. So you sit down and you write a book, you're applying your mind, right? You create a painting like the one behind us, you're applying your mind. Or you create a vaccine for COVID-19, you're applying your mind. So the legal consequences and the legal rights and entitlements that attach to that are called intellectual property rights. And it's a vast and broad field that includes protections that apply either to creative and innovative works like in the literature and in the art sphere, or creations that are scientific, or creations that are as a result of historical, traditional, cultural practices. So there is a vast and broad universe that we could spend a year talking about. So the important thing is to know that if you're applying your mind to produce something, there is certainly some kind of IP right that attaches to that. And the key thing is figuring out which type of IP attaches to the kind of work that you are doing. One of the funniest things that happens in my work is somebody writes a book and says, I want to patent my book. And I have to explain to them, you cannot patent it. You cannot. You can have copyright of it. You cannot patent it.
But then that means then there is a lack of information that actually needs to be put out there to the people. How is your firm helping in that regard?
Absolutely. What we do is we host workshops. We try to make them as accessible as possible. The most recent one is we hosted an intellectual property masterclass for performers. So we were dealing specifically with performers' rights, sort of capacitating and building on the kind of knowledge to say what legal entitlements do you have. And we also brought on board a company called Kumo Studios to say, since they have the practical application of what it's like to be in the performance industry, we bring in the legal aspect, they bring in the practical aspect. We capacitate our constituents such that when they go out, they are able to function as productive market entities. So we have been doing these workshops since 2019. We've done some workshops in so far as Tanzania at some point, but a majority of them we've done here in Botswana, and we will continue to be doing that for the foreseeable future.
Growing up, there's always been issues or news coming out about IP. The likes of, I think, legendary artists like Brenda Fassie, they've always been complaining to say they've been robbed of millions and all of that. Where are we missing it though? Where does the problem start?
Knowledge is the problem. Knowledge is the problem, and the application of knowledge is the problem. Firstly, you have to know what you're entitled to. I think what happened in the early days of the creative industry in Botswana, and drawing also examples from South Africa, is you have the creators being unaware of what they are entitled to, and you have the business entities that monetize that creativity, the producers and the recording companies, being in a position to know what the economic value of that creativity is, but nobody's giving each other the information. So I know what you're worth, but I'm not going to tell you what you're worth, right? I'm happy and able to take your creativity and monetize it, but because you don't know what you don't know, I'm not going to bring you on board. There's questions of ethics around that. But most importantly, the more that we are in an environment where the creators are unaware of, firstly, what they're creating, the potential for what they're creating, and the value of what they're creating, they are then unable to claim any sort of substantial benefit or substantial entitlement out of it, because I could come up with a process that can produce, let's say, 10 million over the next 5 years.
Yeah.
If I walk into your office and I think, I just came up with this idea on a Saturday, I can give it to you for 5,000 pula.
Yeah.
Right? Because I haven't really gained the knowledge. I haven't really done the research around what can this do in the market?
Yeah.
Legally, what am I entitled to out of this?
Yeah.
If I'm going to transfer this to someone, what are the legal implications and what are the business implications?
Yeah.
So knowledge is the problem.
Yeah. But then oftentimes, like, creatives, what they really always ever have to worry about is, how do I become better? How do I bring out a better song than the one that I had last time? And I don't really need to be dealing with these fancy legal stuff. That is for Letlhogonolo to take care of that on my behalf.
Yeah.
How could we then maybe try to change how things has been going, especially with these ones that are coming up, to say, let's, in as much as you'd want to be focused on your craft and your creative process, but then also anything else that surrounds you, you really need to also have an understanding of it. How do you instill such in their mind?
I mean, I think you have to understand why you're doing what you're doing.
Yeah.
For example, if you're creating music for the sake of creating music, then you don't really need to be worrying about IP, because it doesn't matter whether you eat at the end of the day. If you're creating music as an artist who is running a business, you are going to have to learn to behave as a business.
Yeah.
You don't go into business half prepared. You don't go into business thinking some things are your concern and others aren't.
Yeah.
It is your business at the end of the day. And that's the unfortunate thing. I think a lot of creatives locally need to shift from the I'm just a creative and I just want to create mindset. That's fine if you just want to create. But if you want to run a business out of your creativity, you have to think and act like a business.
Yeah. Earlier on, you mentioned that IP has some sort of a contribution to the economic development of any economy. What sort of examples or specific cases would you come up with that would actually show us a great display of entrepreneurship or job creation in the economy through IP?
Yeah, I mean, we don't really have to go far. We're in Botswana.
Yeah.
The biggest market is the informal, the informal sector in Botswana. And that informal sector largely comprises of people who are waking up every day to say, I'm seeing a solution, a problem in my community, and how can I be the solution to the problem? There's a lot of, I recently saw a backpack that captures sunlight and generates light.
Yeah, solar backpack.
So things like that. There are so many young Botswana who are creating things like that. You look at our traditional music industry, for example. That's really one of my favorite examples to say. There's so many people that have drawn from the culture and our history to create new sounds, to create new music that has traveled the world. People now on TikTok are singing when
Yeah.
You see, the ability of that to travel is one thing, but the ability of that to also become an economic thing is another thing that we need to take into consideration. There was a study a few years ago, 2-3 years ago, that revealed that the creative sector in Botswana accounts for roughly around 3 to 5% of our GDP. That is huge.
Yeah.
So we are creating. We just need to start behaving as people who are creating economic value.
Yeah. All right. Let's go for a quick break. When we come back, we will continue with our conversation of the Convo Lounge podcast. Please do check it out and let us know what you think on 76519992 or use the hashtag Convo Lounge Africa across the different social media platforms.
This is the Convo Lounge. Expression, exposure, experience.
Right, welcome back to the Convo Lounge podcast, and today we're talking intellectual property with an IP lawyer. Is it lawyer or advocate?
I am an intellectual property consultant.
Okay, international intellectual property consultant. Yes. So before we went to the break, you were just touching on how a majority of the sector in Botswana, the informal sector, would be the ones that would have benefit to that IP, right? Maybe let's just try to break it down. At what level do I now start in engaging you? Like I said, I am as a creative. I want to write a song.
Yeah.
I just want to produce it and perform to the masses. But at what level do I then need to say, let me now go to the consultant?
Yeah, because there's no formula to it, because again, there's no formula to creativity. You could wake up in the morning and write a hit song and then realize, I need to do something.
Or just say something on TikTok and then you could I could have profited from the hashtag.
Right, exactly. So it could either be that, or it could be you wake up in the morning and you say, I want to do XYZ. How do I structure what I'm about to do? Yeah. So there really is no method to it. But the most important thing is at the earliest opportunity where you realize the need to engage, somebody like myself, whether it's a consultant, whether it's a legal brain. That's the right time to do it at the earliest opportunity, because what you don't want is to place it's an asset. Place your asset at risk and then come later when you have to fight off against people that are infringing on your rights. So a lot of the work that we do is surrounding infringement. So clients come to us and they say, somebody has used my thing without my consent, and how do I stop them? How do I get them to pay me back? Or how do I stop them from doing that? And as much as that's work that we're very happy to do, a lot of this could be prevented if in the first place there were structures that were set in place to ensure that your registrations are in place, your defense, your intellectual property management framework is in place.
Oftentimes there's an issue about what proof then do you have to say I have a claim to this creation. What is the proof? Where do you...
The proof is always the fun of the work. For me, that's what, with my legal background, of course, that's what I enjoy the most, being able to prove that there is a link between A and B. But I cannot prove that link if you yourself do not leave breadcrumbs. It's like a Hansel and Gretel kind of thing. You have to leave breadcrumbs so that we're able to find you. What I always advise clients is if you are pitching, make sure that there's a written record. For example, if you're sharing your ideas, make sure that there's a written trail of records. You step into a meeting, and you're saying, okay, I'm going to build a spaceship that goes to the moon and plants flowers on the moon and what. And then you leave the conversation and then, you talk about it over the phone, and then 2 years later, BK has a rocket on the moon, and you're saying, but I spoke to him about this 2 years ago. But there's no evidence that you ever said that, right? So you leave the meeting, you send an email per our conversation. As I said in our conversation, you get them to acknowledge that. There are other tools, again, NDAs. You can use NDAs to say, I'm about to disclose confidential information to you, and you need to make a signed commitment that you're not going to use this information against or without my consent. That's a tricky one, because a lot of investors, if you're pitching to them and you're saying, I want you to sign an NDA, they're going to say, I don't even know what you're bringing to the table. Right? And that's why for us, it was more important to not just be a legal entity, but a consulting firm broadly, because we understand, yes, the legal aspect is there and the legal aspect can be fun, but IP is business at the end of the day. You need to have a balance between, yes, these are my legal rights, but what are the business factors at play? If I'm going to approach Microsoft and say I'm pitching them a software, are they going to sign an NDA? I'm just Letlhogonolo from Botswana, right? How do I navigate that business setting?
And when you look at maybe the cost element to that, I'm just a startup, just a creative that are just starting up. And when you talk about going to a legal consultant for advice, you charge per hour. And how does that look like?
I do. Are you asking me what my fee is?
Something of that sort. Like, how expensive would it be? Like, for somebody who's listening in and would want to, tap into that space, what should they be prepared for?
I mean, it really depends on who you're engaging and what skill set they have. For me, my current fee is 2,000 pula per hour. That's because I have a master's in intellectual property from one of the biggest think tanks in the world. So when you're paying me 2,000 an hour, you're paying for that level of expert advice. But we also have a SME discount because we realized that a large number, like you were saying earlier, the large number of creatives are in the small and medium enterprise sector, the informal sector. So these are industries where there isn't really a steady cash flow. So we need to take that into consideration if we want to be helpful. So we do have a 50% discount for SMEs and creatives, where we just say, okay, at least for the consultation, we will do this at half the price, just so we help you be able to get on your feet and get your things in order. But over and above that, again, the workshops that we host, because a key element of our workshops is accessibility. So we charge very minimal fees that cover just the logistics, to make sure that at least if you can't afford to, rent me for an hour, you can come in with a group of other people and be in a room, and you all have access to me for like the next 3 hours, and we can, talk it out.
That's very encouraging. Let's talk about your master's degree. You have a master's degree in intellectual property management.
I have a master's degree in intellectual property and development policy.
Okay.
Yes.
From where?
From the Korean Development Institute School of Public Policy and Management.
How did that come about?
I saw a post on Twitter. I saw a post on Twitter about a school hosting a session. I actually missed the session, but I requested information and I was sent the information, and then I went on the website and I applied. I was accepted to the school, and then I applied for a scholarship from the World Intellectual Property Organization, and I got the scholarship, and I got to study in South Korea for about a year.
The scholarship, is it something that is open? Do they have it coming out every now and then, or?
Yes. So the scholarship has a yearly intake. The school and the scholarship have a yearly intake. I think the program starts in January every year. So usually they take applications around August, September. But it's an annual intake. So if you are interested in it, the school particularly, it's a policy school. What the school is something that I think we should consider doing in Botswana is what the Korean government did back in the day. Is they realized that a lot of their best minds were outside of Korea, working in the US and things like that. So what they did is they built the Korean Development Institute and called all these Ivy League graduates back to Korea to basically be a think tank and inform government policy. So you have academics guiding government policy. And from that think tank developed the school that I went to. So again, it has a yearly intake, and you can apply if you're interested in public policy. If you're interested in intellectual property, you can do that.
So what was your paper on? Did you have any paper that you had to write for your master's degree? Maybe you can touch on that.
Yes. So my master's research was on the utility of geographical indications and bolstering economic development in developing countries. Geographical indications are a type of intellectual property that deal with the quality of a product as a result of its location of origin. So, for example, when you talk of champagne, you're talking about a specific kind of sparkling wine that was developed in a specific region of France under a specific method. So that's a kind of geographical indication. And my argument was to say, can we have this for products from Botswana? Because we have a wealth of products that are very unique in how we produce them to Botswana. Specifically looking in my paper at beef. We have beef that we think is very well known.
I've heard you have the best beef in the world.
I entered my research with that mindset that we have the best beef in the world. But the literature was not affirming of that position. So it was kind of like a moment of pause for me, because I was like, oh, wait, what do you mean? Because I'm seeing all of these papers about beef from Argentina, beef from Spain, beef from Japan, But I was like, no, we're not. I see social media posts that say we have the best beef. I'm not seeing academic research and reports and journals that say we do. But my argument in my paper is, it's not that we don't have the best beef, it's that we failed to put in a structure in place to ensure that the quality of our beef is competitive in the way that the quality of champagne is competitive. So I'm able to read about Kobe beef from Japan, for example, because they have that geographical indication in place. And, you know, whenever you say Kobe beef, you immediately associate it with certain qualities, certain origins. We don't have that for Botswana beef, and it's something that we could be looking into, that I recommend in my paper that we should be looking into, so that next time somebody says we have the best beef, there's a journal article that proves it.
But then which location would actually be that geographical indication to say maybe you could have a Botswana beef that is
I mean, to go without disclosing too much my recommendations, but you have regions like the Khansi region, because when you're building a geographical indication, you're looking at things like you're looking at the climate, you're looking at common practices, you're looking at methods of production that are shared amongst people in that area, and you have an area like Khansi, for example, where you have similar climate, similar breeds that are raised in that area, similar practices that are adopted for the raising of the cattle and the processing of the beef and all of that. So it's a good start. I think if there's anybody who's watching this and thinking, what are the other recommendations about how this can be implemented, you know where to find it.
And also talking about that, because I think we really need to move to a point where our research papers are trying to solve the problems that are in our economy, and who would you say would be the people who would be best fit to maybe tap into your research paper and look maybe at the different value chains that might come out of that paper alone?
I think firstly, public policy decision makers, so people in government, parastatals, I think those are the perfect people to be taking up the recommendations, because at the end of the day, those are the people that set policy. I think research institutions as well, because what I'm trying to do is the academic, during my time I produced several papers. Some of them deal with film sector, some of them deal with the agricultural sector, but all of them exploring intellectual property in those fields. So there are very different areas and there are very different stakeholders that could be engaged, but largely government institutions, academic institutions, and private actors as well, to say, if you're looking to maximize the potential of whatever intellectual property you have, then those recommendations apply to you as well. It's not for you to wait for a policy setting decision. It's also for you to say, this is what's possible and this is what I can do. I recently had a conversation with some farmers who were dealing with basically the produce from their farms, and how they wanted to distinguish that in the market, and looking at what intellectual property issues arise around that. So, those are people that, should they be willing, I'm very able and happy to assist.
But then someone like that, who would then be, I'll say, the custodians or the owners of that IP? Looking at the different people in that value chain. Is it now the farmer because I believe if the farmer doesn't have that cow or raise the cow or give it some certain feeds and all of that, then the person who's at the retail level wouldn't be benefiting.
You bring up a very interesting point, because one of the findings of my paper is that for geographical indications specifically, there is such an unequal distribution of wealth or value derived. So you find that geographical indications are based on location, practice, right? So practice informs the product, what the product becomes. The custodians of those practices are usually the farmers on the ground. It's my grandmother Kolapeng, right? So those are the people that maintain these practices. But when you look at the value chain, the people that get the biggest share out of the value chain are the end product. So the retailers, for example, are the ones, because I walk into the store and I see the champagne sticker on it, and I buy it at a premium because of that labeling, right? But the person that was harvesting the grapes and knows and actually carries that knowledge gets the least share out of this. So one of my recommendations is, as we implement a GI system for Botswana, a Geographical Indication system for Botswana, we need to set up or have policy measures that ensure equal distribution of wealth along the value chain, because without the practice, you don't have the GI. Without the people that are able to finance, the business and take the product to market, you don't have the GI. Without the retailers, you don't have the GI in the market. So we need to be able to ensure that everybody gets their fair share.
So during your stay at South Korea and going through your studies, what sort of culture around maybe also the intellectual property sector or segment do you think that we could maybe leverage from, or just get a leaf from that paper?
There's a lot we can, because one of the things that is fascinating about South Korea is it's a country without natural resources. So when they gained independence, they were coming from war. They gained independence relatively around the same time as us, plus minus 6 or so years. So they were coming from a war. They did not have minerals that, we were blessed with a bounty of diamonds. But they did not have such a thing. So they had to rely on the production of skills and knowledge in order to push their economy. And it's exciting to have experienced that culture and that institute or that kind of country level institution at this time, because we're at a time in Botswana where the biggest thing on everyone's mind is transition to a knowledge-based economy. We are trying to become the next South Korea. So there is a lot that we can learn from them in terms of prioritizing firstly the development of human capital that is able to produce knowledge, capacitating our systems in such a way that they are able to capture and deploy knowledge in a useful way, capacitating our systems in such a way that we are able to derive economic value both locally and internationally from the knowledge and the creativity that we produce.
Fantastic. I think we're gonna leave it there, unless there's any more that you would want to add to our conversation today. It's just so it could be a mindset shift to somebody who's watching out there. And
I mean, I like the fact that you bring the mindset shift. Going back to things that are happening in Botswana, I think one of the biggest campaigns happening right now is Arichinching, and etc. And I think it's very important, because what we've done, so it's not that. So maybe to draw a bit from my proposal when I was applying for school, I had to explain why I want to study this. And I said, coming from the African continent, I witness creativity every day, in both the artistic sense and in both the functional sense, because we have to deal with so many social and environmental and economic issues that we are forced to be creative about it, right? We are forced to, you have to learn if you take this piece of wood and you put it together with this one, you can make something, right? We are forced to create music and stories that address the issues that we deal with. So on the continent, creativity is something that we experience every day, yet we are yet to set up the kind of systems that actually capture the true value of what we are producing every day. So as we're changing our mindsets, one of the things that we need to change is have a sense of self-recognition, a sense of self-worth, to be able to say, it's not just that is a wealth of intellectual property gifted to you by your own history that you are able to take your mind and apply to and produce something entirely new. Because if you don't do that, you're going to be watching it on Netflix.
I don't remember if I remember it.
You're going to be watching it on Netflix, and the Americans are going to be making hundreds of millions of dollars on it, and then we're going to be crying because and this is already happening. A lot of African stories are being told.
Yeah.
The money is not coming to Africa.
Yeah.
A lot of African technologies are being adopted abroad. The money is not coming to Africa. Even in fashion, there was a huge case a few years ago where I think it was, I can't name, I don't want to get sued.
Yeah.
They took the Basutu blanket, and it was like the main thing of their fashion show in Paris. And people were saying, well, how do you take something that is so culturally significant, but you're benefiting from it, and the communities that it's coming from are not getting anything? And the thing is, these are, sorry if I'm rambling, but these are things that there are structures in place.
Yeah.
There's a treaty called the Sokoman Protocol that Botswana is party to. The Sokoman Protocol requires governments to set up structures that ensure that communities where traditional things like mainani, what we do with the devil's claw and things like that, to ensure that those communities benefit. We just need to act on it.
Yeah.
Oh,
you need to act on it. Guys, thank you very much for joining us on our podcast today. And I think we're just going to leave it there. If you want to get in the conversation, our hashtag is Convo Lounge Africa across different social media platforms. 7651 992 on WhatsApp. Bye.
This is the Convo Lounge. Expression, exposure, experience.